Hello there, humans. I'm still working on my book about Buddhist ethics and the connection between non-duality and ethics, and it's a bear. I'm really having trouble with it, but it's still coming along. It's still in fits and starts. Someone asked about my writing process, and basically it's just once I have a theme for the book, I just start writing things related to that theme, and I keep them in a file on my laptop, the very laptop that I'm using to record this video. And once I got a lot of them, enough that I feel like, okay, well, this is enough material for a book, then I try to figure out how to stitch them together into something. That's my usual process. So that's what I'm doing. But I thought I would do a book review today. I keep mentioning this book, I Am That, by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, and I realized I haven't done anything like a book review of the book. And for those of you who have complained before that you think I'm doing book reviews of books that I haven't read, which I have not actually done. I've made comments about books that I haven't read, but I've also always said that I didn't read the book, and this is a comment based on the cover of the book or the way the book is being sold or the way the book is being perceived by people and so on and so forth. I'm not reviewing the book. Well, this one I can review, and in fact, I am well qualified to review it because I read the entire book once and then decided to read it again. And I'll tell you why. The original reason I got this book in the very first place is several months ago I had the idea that I wanted to research the Advaita Vedanta tradition, which is a non-dualistic tradition that comes out of Hinduism. It would probably be a misnomer to call it Hinduism because Advaita Vedanta teachers very rarely reference Hindu scriptures or Hindu concepts, or sometimes they do, but they put such a spin on them that it's difficult sometimes to recognize exactly what they're talking about. And certainly an Advaita Vedanta teacher would not give the same account, for example, of reincarnation as what appears in the Bhagavad Gita. You know, the Bhagavad Gita has this idea of a immortal soul that lives in the center of your chest somewhere. I don't know if the Bhagavad Gita gets that specific, but this immortal soul lives in your body somewhere and departs the body when the body dies. And so there's a very dualistic sense of the person and the body, the material world. Advaita Vedanta doesn't admit that. They take a very clear stance that everything is one. And it's a really interesting tradition because it's sort of floating in the middle of nowhere in a sense that like I say, it comes out of the Hindu tradition and occasionally uses terminology from that tradition, but rarely, and especially a guy like this. So, the story of Nisargadatta Maharaj, as I've gleaned it from reading this book and looking at things on the internet and stuff, is that he was a merchant. He ran a bunch of cigarette shops. I get the impression that they were sort of like an Indian version of a convenience store almost, like little tiny convenience shops that mainly sold cigarettes and snacks and candies and stuff. And sometime in his 30s, he got the idea to get into a spiritual practice, and for a few years he devoted himself to that, and during the meantime all but one of his cigarette shops went out of business because he wasn't paying enough attention to them. So he came back and he had one cigarette shop left, and he'd had this amazing kind of what we in the Zen tradition would call enlightenment experience, although I hate the word enlightenment experience, but something, akin to the Zen idea of a Kensho or Satori kind of experience of a profound realization that for him was deeply profound. And he just went back, started running his cigarette shop, the one he'd always ran. He had a wife and some kids, and he had this little apartment in Bombay, as it was called then, and now it's called Mumbai. And he just lived in this little, it looks like a one-bedroom apartment above a train station or something. I've seen pictures of it, and it looks very humble. This is not an ashram or anything great like that. And people would come and visit him and talk to him about spirituality and stuff. And this book, which originally came out in 1973, was a compendium of talks that he'd given, like little dialogues he'd given with people. He apparently spoke a bit of English, but not enough to kind of be conversant in the subjects he wanted to talk about, so it was all translated into English from, I don't know which Indian language, but not one I'd ever heard of. There's a lot of languages in India. This is an interesting book because, as I think I said, I don't remember what I said at the beginning, I'd asked Tim McCarthy, my first Zen teacher, for recommendations about books on the Advaita Vedanta tradition. And I sort of expected him to recommend me like a textbook of Advaita Vedanta, but instead he recommended this, and I thought, okay, I'll check that out. And the thing of it is, I must have, and this is the reason I'm reading it twice, is because it seems like when I first read it, it didn't hook me. You know, I just sort of, the chapters are very short. Each little dialogue with a person, I mean, here's one that's only 2 pages. They might be up to 5 pages in length, but that's about as long as any given chapter of this book would be. And I was reading about 1 or 2 chapters a day and kind of going, okay, whatever. And it wasn't until page 108 that it really struck me as being something special. And I know that because I do this thing when I like a book. I will start writing little notes in the back of the book, because I don't like to write in the pages of the book. So I write notes in the back of the book that tell what page a certain quote is on and what that quote is, and then I can usually go back and find them later. And let me just read you a random sampling of them, because the thing that's interesting about Nisargadatta Maharaj is he reminds me a lot of Dogen, not in his way of expression, because Dogen was a highly educated guy who used a lot of literary allusions and a lot of very high-spoken, fancy language to express himself, because that's the kind of person he was. Nisargadatta Maharaj, I think, completed the equivalent of what we'd call like 4th or 5th grade in the American system, so he never even went to high school. So he's very plain-spoken, but a lot of the ideas he comes across with sound real Dogen-ish. And I'm just going to read you a random sampling of some of the things that I wrote in the back of the book. You are not the mind, and its problems are not yours. Let each desire bring you back to yourself. I think that's an interesting one. Your body is in you, not you in your body, which is a complete change around from the normal Hindu kind of idea as expressed in the Bhagavad Gita. The mind's natural state is silence. You are neither your body nor your mind, which is straight up what Dogen always says. To change the world, cease identifying with it. That's an interesting quote. Love precedes creation, and without it there is only chaos. He talks a lot about love, which is interesting because the Zen tradition doesn't talk about love. Seer and seen are aspects of seeing. That sounds like it could have come straight out of Dogen. Just as every drop of the ocean carries the taste of the ocean, so does every moment carry the taste of eternity. I like that one. He talks a lot about maintaining purity of body and clarity of mind and practicing nonviolence and selflessness. He says your brain would be shattered by the actual truth, which is interesting. Here's one. There are other levels at which man is more cooperative than this level. I found that intriguing. I'm not sure where he gets that or what that means, but I have an inkling of what I think it means. Karma is the healing hand of God. That's an interesting way to put it. You are pure awareness that illuminates consciousness and its infinite content. There's a good one. Reminds me a little bit of Dogen's One Bright Pearl. And let me read you something from it. This comes from page 54, a dialogue called, let's see, To know what you are, find out what you are not. And I don't know why, but for some reason this really reminded me of Dogen's idea of Zazen. In Zazen, turn the light around and shine it inward. But he doesn't say anything like that at all. So let me read it to you. You cannot possibly say that you are what you think yourself to be. Your ideas about yourself change from day to day and from moment to moment. Your self-image is the most changeful thing you have. It is utterly vulnerable, at the mercy of a passerby. A bereavement, the loss of a job, an insult, and your self-image of yourself, which you call your person, changes deeply. To know what you are, you must first investigate and know what you are not. And to know what you are not, you must watch yourself carefully, rejecting all that does not necessarily go with the basic fact, I am. The idea is, I am born at a given place at a given time from my parents, and now I am so-and-so, living at, married to, father of, employed by, and so on, are not inherent to the sense of I am. Our usual attitude is of I am this. Consistently and perseveringly separate the I am from this or that, and try to feel what it means to be, just to be, without being this or that. All our habits go against it, and the task of fighting them is long and hard sometimes, but clear understanding helps significantly. The more clearly you understand that on the level of the mind you can be described in negative terms only, the more quickly you will come to the end of your search and realize your limitless being. That's some pithy stuff. Yath, pith, as Woody Allen once said. And here's another one that I thought was neat, and I even made a mark on the page for it. Somebody asks, why has God made me as I am? And the Maharaj answers, which God are you talking about? What is God? Is he not the very light by which you ask the question? I am itself is God. The seeking itself is God. In seeking you discover that you are neither the body nor the mind, and the love of the self in you is for the self in all. The two are one, the consciousness in you and the consciousness in me, apparently two, really one. Seek unity, and that is love. So it's a really interesting book. It is not part of the Zen tradition at all, so you're not going to learn a lot about the Zen tradition if you read it, but I think it is worth reading. The only little caution I'll give you is something that Tim said to me when he recommended the book. He said, Advaita Vedanta is a beautiful method of expression, but you have to be careful because it's also a deep, deep trap, like the stink of Zen. So that's what he told me about that. And it's quite interesting. Like, this book has been out since 1973. I could easily have come across it when I first started getting into this stuff that I got into. And I think if I'd done that, if I'd gotten into this book too early in my personal quest, it might have led me a little bit astray, in the sense that it doesn't come from a tradition that's accessible to someone like me. That's what kind of makes Zen a good tradition, especially if you're a contemporary Westerner, because it is accessible. It's one of the few non-dualistic traditions that come out of Asia that is, pretty accessible to a Western person. Now, it's not on every street corner you're going to find a Zen temple, and people always complain about how far they have to look. But try finding an Advaita Vedanta teacher in the United States of America somewhere. Good luck with that. You might find one, I don't know. But it's not exactly the same thing. And, the Advaita Vedanta tradition is a bit scattershot. There's some good stuff there, and there's some stuff there that isn't so good. Well, I guess you could say that about the Zen tradition too. So I'll take that back, even though I said it already. So there you go. That's my review of I Am That by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. He's got a kind of hard name to say, but that's his name. And really like the book, and I recommend it with those caveats I said. If you want to donate to me being able to buy more books, here's the link below. I really appreciate your donations. That's what I'm mainly living on, especially this year, because, the way things are. But I know a lot of people are struggling, and so don't donate to me if you don't have money to donate. Don't feel like, oh, poor Brad, he's got to have money. People are fairly consistently donating to me, and I really appreciate those of you who are, because, a lot of things I would have done this year I'm not doing. So that really makes up for a lot of that. And I will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye.